Good morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and get more information about this show and previous shows on our website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield. I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on positive news and information by people and organizations in both North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Karen DeHaven, who's the founder and director of AHA, Studio for Integrated Therapies, for being my guest today. Welcome, board.
Thank you, Blaine. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. And by the way, you should also feel free to wave to all you fans and friends who are watching this. So this is Karen.
Hey!
You got it. I should mention that Karen DeHaven is licensed a professional counselor and board-certified dance movement psychotherapist. That's kind of an interesting combination, with a specialty in helping women, children, and families who are ready to overcome emotional setbacks by developing awareness, insight, and building resiliency skills through creative therapeutic processes. She specializes in helping clients who struggle with anxiety, childhood trauma, and emotional overwhelming situations. Her life work merges her love of movement and play with her passion for depth psychology and a natural compassion for the human journey to find purpose and belonging. So let me ask you, Karen, what I do typically when I meet somebody for the first time is I ask, as a kid, you grew up where?
I grew up in Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C.
And when you were growing up in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., did you always know you wanted to be into this field?
No, I wanted to be a veterinarian. Hands down, I was going into vet school. I spent a lot of time gathering up little creatures who had hurt themselves, trying to nurse them back to life. And when I couldn't nurse them back to life and they would pass away, I would sing songs and hold rituals and bury them in special places and thank them for playing in our trees. And I was sort of woven from a slightly different cloth than the rest of the kids on the street. And so I figured it was a natural fit for veterinary school, but when I got a little bit further along, the dissections were not something my gut could handle. And so I just moved over to the human species and became a psychotherapist.
So, so you were doing this as a child, you had an interest. Even now, do you have like lots of pets at home, or are you a pet person?
I only now have one. We actually have we tend to do a lot of rehabbing of strays, and so I only have one little stray right now who's no longer a stray. She's an elder. But there was a therapy cat here actually for
I see
years.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's
yeah.
that's what my wife eventually wants to do. She wants to have a therapy cat, take it elsewhere. So you had one for a while there?
Yep, yep. Mishka lived here for a number of years and was really instrumental, particularly with the children. The children knew that she was there, and if they were working on their goals or working on something that was a little bit hard, they could actually earn Mishka
Oh, really?
time at the back end. Yeah.
So unfortunately, Misha's no longer around.
She was a super elder and yeah, she walked her full days and now she protects the backyard and is buried beneath some trees back there.
So are you eventually going to get another therapy cat or down the road?
You know, she actually lived here and emotionally I felt like it was really difficult on her. And so I don't think we'll probably um, get another therapy animal, at least at this point. Our cat right now at home is very much a solo cat. She does not like other animals, and so until her life is seen through, I think we're just going to stay a one cat family, and then who knows? I don't know. Down the road, I'd be open to it.
I told you off the air, I should someday have you speak to my wife because we have one cat, same kind of thing, very happy, love the cat. But my wife has the idea that she only wants to get a second cat or even a dog or something. And I said,
Mhm.
the cat's very happy as it is, you know. So
Yeah.
that's what we'll face that down the road. So you eventually switched from being a veterinarian. When were you in college? Were you a senior, or when did you make the switch to actually get into therapy?
Well, I would say I've always really been a therapist. Just as a kid, they don't give you that title. As a kid, I was a gymnast and I was a cheerleader and I was all of these other things. A pretty good student. And and I figured I would actually be a vet all the way up through somewhere in high school. And then in college, I realized that I was sort of the go-to person. If people were breaking up with their boyfriends or girlfriends, or they had explored too much with alcohol or drugs or anything, I tended to be the person that people called. If a stray cat was in the dorm, like, who do you call? Karen. Or a bat flies into the bathroom. Who do you call? And so I sort of the natural keeper of little things and protector of life as a child sort of became keeper of secrets and protector of others in college. And once that became sort of a natural calling. And it was unnerving because people would tell me things that, I'm the type of person you sit down next to at a bus stop and we start talking. And suddenly people are telling me their biggest trauma stories. And they would leave and I would be holding all of that and really didn't know what to do with it. So when I was ready to decide what professional path I was going to take, I spoke to my father. I always love this story. My father was he was an ophthalmologist and sort of a gentle, affable, sort of portly fellow. And he's sitting in his little seersucker PJs one morning. And I went down and I said, Dad, if I'm going to become a therapist, do you think I should take the path and simply go to medical school and become a psychiatrist? And he sat back very thoughtfully and sort of chewed. He would always chew. I could tell when he was like in his thoughtful mode. And he painted the picture of what it would be like to become a psychiatrist. And he said, if you want to do short interviews and write up long documents and be responsible for medication um, and work in a hospital, then that sure, absolutely, I think you'd be great in medical school. Not what I was interested in. And he said, but if you want the direct contact, if you want to actually be doing and offering the good medicine to people through direct therapeutic contact, I think graduate school or maybe a PhD would probably be a good path. And I was like, okay, so
In college, were you an RA at all?
no, but I
Yes.
lived with the RA.
Okay. Because it seemed that would have been like the perfect job for you, to have done that in college, to help, other people. But
Yeah.
RA. So interesting. I love how your dad expressed that. And by the way, is your dad still around?
No,
It's too
no,
bad
he's
we
passed.
were told we were talking about him today, but in spirit, I
Yeah,
love that story. So because
absolutely.
that's a great story and great how he expressed it. So that's how you got into becoming a therapist as opposed to becoming a psychiatrist. I love it. So
Yeah.
you made that decision at some point in time, I guess, toward the end of your college career, and you went to graduate school.
I took a year and ventured into the performance art scene in DC, and then danced for the company out in Colorado. And then my father got quite sick, so I returned home to what I thought help him survive. And it was actually really a journey of helping him accept his mortality and path. And once that was complete and he had moved into spirit, then I took a couple months to be there with my mom to support her and for us to tend our grieving wounds. And then I went off to graduate school.
And what I love, what you just said there, is how you kind of had an interest in performing arts, and we want to talk about that, how you use that to tie into what you do, which is so cool, so
Yeah.
you do what you do, but as definite tie into performing arts, is that the thrust of it?
So I had the privilege of being born to two parents that were very traditional, and I fit in academically to that world, but I was woven of a different weave. And my parents were so smart to really stoke the fire in me to say, love, figure out what it is that you love to do, and then find a way for it to support the kind of life that you want to live. And those were the only requirements. And what I love to do is I love to move. I love to be there when people are hurting, and I love to help people find ways to live a better life and with more joie de vivre, right? More freedom, more joy. And I'm willing to go into the shadows with people in order to help them find their way out and into the light. And so I am a dancer. I've always been a dancer, and I've danced in a lot of different forms, from traditional Balanchine ballet to modern and performance art companies across the nation. And so I love moving, and I was an English lit theater and dance with a dance concentration major in undergrad. And I had a lot of good mentors who sort of brought it all together, brought the depth and the analysis and the analytic side of me together with this movement and expressive side of me, and gave me the platform to be able to really run with that. And my parents supported that along the way. And then it was people out in the world who read that, in fact, I was a compassionate and gentle being that would walk through dark spaces with them. And so I just sort of brought all three of those avenues together, and dance movement therapy was a moment. I danced in New York for 3 months or so. Not really the thriving scene for an injured dancer. Um, but I was there, and I was lighting a cigarette of this wonderful contact improv artist, Nina Martin, who is I've tried to get in touch with her. I would love to be in touch with her because she literally put me on this path. And over this lane, on this windy street in New York City, she goes, "Have you ever thought of dance movement therapy?" And I said, "No, what's that?" And she goes, "You should." And off she walked, jogging behind her, like, what? And all of this was before the internet. So it was this very random little seed planted on a windy, cold day in New York City. And here I am.
Well, you have me wearing my teacher hat here because I'm going to give you an assignment. We had talked off the air about some things you might want to do. One of the things I'll ask you to do is after the show, let's dig her up and send her this clip. You
I
know,
would love to.
let's do
Yeah.
it, or I'll help
Yeah.
you find her. But that would be a great story, that she inspired you to do this. So update me then a little bit then, Karen. So you went to college, undergraduate, eventually got into, studying psychology and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
Did you then, at that point in time, start your own practice, or how did that evolve to where you are now?
So the path to becoming a dance movement therapist is the same as any type of licensed professional. So there's a residency. So you have your undergraduate. I'm sorry, you have your master's program, typically 2 years. I
Right.
took two in a semester because of an injury, and then there's about 2 years where you really it's like a residency. You go into community mental health. That's what I did. I worked at a children's psychiatric hospital called the Flex program, at Central Montgomery's Mental Health and Mental Retardation Center in Norristown. And I got my training. I got my supervision and training, and then had to apply for my board certification, got that, continued with more supervision and more training. And then I was able to sit for my licensing exam and became a licensed professional counselor in Pennsylvania. And it's only really at that point that you can actually practice in private practice without a supervisor, and all of the
Got you. So
the structure around it.
what year, about when was that? How many years ago?
So I graduated from graduate school in 97, and I got my license in 2007, I think.
You mentioned this, I find this hard to believe, because when you graduate, like you were the youngest graduate, whoever went to school there, you graduated like at the age of 9 or 10, it's, how you did this. So you graduated and you can then become, you can enter the field. What did you do then? Did you enter the field, or did you go in with somebody, or how do you enter the field?
So as I mentioned, I was a group therapist at a children's psychiatric
Right?
hospital. And I was the group therapist for about 3 years. And then, as typically happens in community mental health, if you're good at what you do, they move you into administration. And so I became a supervisor and a crisis manager. So I was like the heavy, right? I was the one who, if kids were, throwing chairs and starting fights, I was the one who would show up in the doorway, and I would I speak softly and I walk with great authority. And so all of the kids knew that if I showed up in the doorway and I leaned in and I said, I'm going to count to three, you need to be out the door or I'm going to help you. And I would stand back and I would clear the room and make sure everybody moved back. There was a clear path to the doorway. And it really only took one or two testers to realize that if I say something, I'm going to follow through. And so, kids would go out screaming and cursing and all of that, but as long as those feet were walking them out the door, we were good. I have a zero tolerance for danger. And so I ended up becoming the crisis manager as a result. Yeah. So I did that for a number of years. And then I moved into early intervention, which, oh, I love early intervention because it's a completely different model than the psychiatric pathology model. And the partial hospital was really based on diagnostic pathology, whereas early intervention for the 0 to 3 child is based on health and development. And so it was really there that I began building the internal model for what is now our services at AHA Studio for Integrated Therapies. And while we still have diagnostics, it really is rooted on where is the strength, where's the growth potential for an individual, regardless of what they're going through, whether it's anxiety or attachment issues or depression, or trauma. And we find what is working and we build on that. That's actually an early intervention model. And that once I got those legs underneath me and I had the psychiatric um, uh, experience and the crisis management, then it was that merged together. And I opened up my doors here at AHA Studio for Integrated Therapies
Well,
in
I'll tell you, I love that.
2009.
I love
Yeah.
that name though. Just what a great name. Um, a really great name. So you've had that
Thank
since
you.
2009 then, right? Yeah, it was
Yep.
the studio. And so talk about in the studio. So the studio is located where?
So we are located in a growing rural or suburban area. It used to be rural. Now it's a little bit more suburban to Philadelphia. So we are about 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia, and we are on a country highway that is growing. This entire area is it's so beautiful because it's bucolic, and it lies right between Philadelphia and New York City. And it's an area where a lot of millennials are starting to come and raise their families. And services like ours are here alongside community mental health and hospitals and Home Depot and all of the things that you need to actually build a sound community for a growing area.
So now that's where you're speaking now. Is that where you are now or you're at home?
Yep, this is AHA Studio.
Oh, I love it. So the AHA Studio, so people go to you or talk about who goes there and what do they go there for?
So, we mostly support and serve families with young children, uh, the mamas who are raising them, and the moms and dads who are holding space for all of it. Um, we focus, there are four clinicians here, myself, and another clinician, another licensed professional counselor. We're both the child specialists, and then we have two women therapists who focus on women's health. And most of our clients are under about 3 feet tall, uh, and the families that love them. And we support children who are on the neurodiverse continuum. So autism and ADHD tends to create a lot of behavioral distress within homes, as well as at school. So we help the families figure out how to support their neurologically different children, and we help the children build coping skills, and then we send them home with behavioral star charts to be able to reinforce whatever new skill has been introduced. Or if there's been a trauma, then we use a format called play therapy. Art therapy, music therapy, and dance therapy are often woven in based on the interest of the child. And a lot of our work ends up not only being the individual work with the child, but also integrated family work. So that there's work going on in between sessions. Because 1 hour a week for a child, you could be there for quite some time. But when you have an integrated model and you bring the family into the support in between sessions, that's when you really start getting and clocking the practices, right? And it's through practice that we build those core skills to be able to become resilient and learn different ways other than like throwing chairs and yelling and
Now,
throwing
in
temper
terms of the
tantrums.
skills developing, are these taught on a one-on-one basis, or is that any of this group work?
So we have finally reopened groups. I love that you asked because we had groups and they were really growing as we were growing back in 2019. And with COVID, all of that closed. Um, so we were really only offering individual therapy. Now we offer in-person as well as virtual individual therapy, and we offer group therapy, which I'm so excited to relaunch our therapeutic arts social skills groups. Um, and we are also beginning to develop a diagnostic evaluation program as a precursor to jumping into weekly or biweekly therapy sessions as well.
Now, in terms of the work you're doing, especially with children, is this again on a one-on-one basis, or are the parents involved at the same time?
So we use an integrated approach. Parents are always involved every 4 to 6 sessions. There is a parent meeting exclusively with the parent so that we can coach the parent, do some psychoeducation around what stage of development we're at. And then in between those, sometimes they're individual therapy sessions with the child, sometimes they're family sessions with both parent and child. Sometimes grandmothers come in. There's some grief work that is coming up with some clients lately, and even the extended family, grandparents, uncles, aunts, whoever is involved and can be supportive. We bring that in to be able to help the children and help the women who are going through these traumas also, because that's really the other side of this, and that is individual and virtual support at this time.
Now, in terms of the children you work with, is there any starting age? In other words, how young can a child be to be helped by your facility?
So, you know, in Pennsylvania, at least right now, the early intervention system is fantastic. If you have a child with any type of a developmental delay, the between the ages of 0 to 3, Early intervention comes to you or to the school and works with the family in the school. So we don't tend to see children 0 to 3. When people call and their child is that young, I typically say, let's tell you about an amazing service in Pennsylvania that they can get delivered at their home directly in their community. Then, once those children graduate into 3 and up, that's really where our work begins. So, if they can get it in the community, I would prefer that families maximize that, create a savings plan if they need to, and which is sometimes what families will do. And then, if a child ends up on the autism spectrum, um, then let's get in there and really work on some of those discrete social skills and address some of the behavioral things early because you want to get in between like before the age of like 13 or 14 because everything gets a lot more complex at that point. We still work with teenagers, but it's a lot more beneficial to get in. If there are problems that are arising during childhood is the time to do that work because teen years, it just gets more complex and it's well, it's a different type of a therapy.
So I was going to ask you that it would seem, as you said, certainly the earlier you start working with a child, the better. But on the
Yeah,
other extreme, you read about, or I read about, that all of a sudden people are discovering that they have autism at 18, 25, and
yeah.
older. When that comes about, can that child or individual be helped even at that point in time?
Absolutely. It does tend to be more complex because that individual not having understood what made them so different, right? Or why they weren't being invited to birthday parties or why they couldn't get physically organized even though they wanted to aspire to be an athlete or be an artist or whatever. If they found themselves at the fringe of the social circle, that has a lot of scarring potential. Not absolute, right? It might not affect an individual, but it typically does. And so when you have those type of emotional traumas, when you're diagnosed at 18 or 25 or 35, it's sort of like this period of time when there could have been support and there could have been um, understanding and not just like, oh, you're lazy or you just don't want to or you're just a bad seed, right? When those messages get sent, and we don't even as adults mean to send those messages, but sometimes they do get sent or they get absorbed. And that's a lot harder to undo in a traumatized, a complex, that becomes what we call a complex trauma. And that trauma can be a social trauma of rejection. And to undo that, there are a lot of layers in the adult psyche that it can take a lot of time. And that individual has gone through years and years of potentially feeling disenfranchised from their social peers. And that can be pretty devastating for the psyche.
When and how does a parent make the decision that it might be helpful for the child to come to your facility or to get just help in general? I mean, that's probably a very tough decision for a parent to make as well.
Yeah,
They're doing the best to raise their child, and all of a sudden, whatever they're doing, I guess, isn't working, or isn't working
right.
as well as it should be.
Sure.
How do you make that decision, or how do you go about doing that?
If what the child is experiencing is causing them to not be able to join in free, joyful, interactive activities, whether it's after school activities or participating easily in school activities, if it's causing distress in the home and other children or other individuals in the home are starting to experience their own exacerbated levels of anxiety, depression, anger, rage, um, and it goes on for a period of time, anything really over like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, without a specific catalyst, right? Without a specific event, but it's just this sort of like pervasive, ongoing pain point for everybody in the family. That's a really good time to say, I wonder if play therapy, I wonder if child therapy, I wonder if my creative kid would thrive in seeking out creative arts therapy for them, for the family, for communication, for attachment, for any of the things that might be sort of caring on a daily basis.
Even as you describe it, I'm just loving it that you're not telling a child you're a bad seed or want to have to, do this or get
Yeah.
you in your younger years after the person. Or what you just said, let's check out play therapy. Or I have to ask you the one in particular I'm interested in when you talk about movement therapy. What does that entail?
So dance movement therapy, the way I use it with children, is typically um, designed around game structures. So I bring game structures in. For instance, in my intake, the adult part of the intake is just a standard talk therapy interview. But when I do the second part of the intake with the child, it is always game based. So, and I am assessing how does the child respond to direct instruction and structures that they're not designing. Um, where are the power stressors during the intake? What is the child's movement repertoire and parameters? How are they relating to me as an unknown being to them? How are they reliant or relating to a parent that they've asked to have in the session? How do they make decisions, choices? What do they choose to share? What does their body do in between times when the focus is on them? Um, when mom is sharing or when I'm sharing. And all of those things give me what I'm looking at, which is a developmental picture of what is their developmental function. Um, level, like what's the baseline? And then because I know what the problems are, the parents tell me the problems. And then I look at what their bodies are telling me and their words are telling me through game structure. And that gives me the developmental baseline. And then I bring those two together and I can develop a treatment plan and a course of action.
So what I hear you saying is there, I guess, a two-step process. That first of all, if the child is young enough to birth to 3 years old, I love what you said. They should check with the school system or where they live and see if there
Early intervention. Yeah.
and see if there are any people who can help them there. At that point in time, I guess then when they get older, work with the school system. But where do you make the decision? I guess the last question I'll ask you is where do you make the decision that and schools do the best they can, but they're limited resources, as to go beyond the school, in terms of they have, I guess, groups and people in school systems and counselors can help them, but woefully understaffed, woefully inadequate. How do you make that
Yeah.
decision that maybe it's time to then go to AHA Studio for integrated therapies? How do you make that decision?
It's really based. I believe it should be based on like general functioning across the week. So if every time a parent goes home and they're sort of rolling their eyes and going, oh gosh, it's going to be like another night of like screaming and sleep resistance and crying and clinging and you know bowel issues and wake ups in the middle of the night and um or if there is severe um distress between siblings, um any type of violence between sibling to sibling, any type of violence towards um, parents or grandparents or anybody in the family, any type of severe emotional meltdown that happens day after day, event after event, that is a really good time to say it's time for some therapy. It's time to get some understanding, to be able to have a partner who can work with us and help our family thrive. Um, that's that's the time to do therapy. And honestly, Summertime, even though a lot of parents will just sort of hammer through summertime, and say, oh, well, we'll see, maybe they'll grow out of it over the summer. And then there's it's almost like a lost summer. Sometimes parents come and bring their kids and they say, we don't even do vacation because it's not worth it. Um, those are signs that the child is in severe distress and the family doesn't have to have that be a chronic event. Summertime is a great time to get kids into therapy because it's a little bit more relaxed and you can actually really gain some traction, build some skills, build some resilience, and move back into a state of thriving rather than just surviving.
Now imagine the other time, the other indication would be if the parent is getting a call every week from school. It's one thing
Yes.
to go in once a year, once every other, twice a year, but to get weekly calls or daily calls,
Yeah.
something's not working. And
Yeah.
schools, they do the best they can, but at some point in time, it might be helpful to get outside help. Karen DeHaven,
Absolutely.
if folks want to get in touch with you, it's AHA Studio. I love again that great first name for it. AHA Studio for Integrated Therapies. What's the best bet?
You can always go to our website at ahastudiotherapy.com. That on socials is also, we are at AHA Studio Therapy. So if you type that in or Google it, you'll find all of our socials, our website, and we offer discovery calls to see what are you looking for and how might we be able to support you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for being my guest on this edition of the Blaine's World webcast.
Yeah.
With Karen DeHaven with AHA Studio for Integrated Therapies. I also like to thank my producer, Captain Cassetti. Hopefully, if someday I'm in Bucks County again, I'll bump into you or you come out to West North Carolina. I'd love to see you. But thank you very much. This was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.